Okay, so Scott, you did get addicted to painkillers as a result of your accidents. Could you talk about that with us a little bit?
Oh yeah. So let's go back to 1991, late 20s, I think. I was playing tennis still. I was a competitive tennis player. I started playing tennis again after retiring for a while. In good shape. Decided I wanted to go down to the music store and look around. It's south of where I live, so I got in the car and I drove south down on Highway 880, and I called my friend who worked as an engineer in my studio with me. I said, hey, I'll come pick you up and we'll go. So I go down the freeway, I get off at the Cloverleaf, and I'm going to go over the freeway. So you get to the top of the off-ramp, and there was a stop sign there. So I stopped, looking both ways for traffic, and in my rearview mirror I see a catering truck coming up behind me, and he's not slowing down enough, and he winds up hitting me and knocked me and my truck into the intersection. It was like one of those cartoons where you see the things flying around you. You know, I had a sloppy truck. I had papers and shit flying around me. I had my hand on the steering wheel, and I remember the impact. You know, a 12,000-pound truck with a bunch of people in it. And after the impact, I kind of regrouped a little bit, and I realized my hand was hurting. And there's a spot right here in my hand that if I touched, it would just shooting pain go all the way up my arm. So I thought maybe I broke my wrist, maybe I broke my hand. So my friend takes me to the emergency room and they treat me. They put a splint on my hand. But the next day, actually, so it was right before, the next day, let's just go there. The next day I woke up, as a lot of people do, the day after you feel a lot worse. And I thought I had whiplash, of course. You know, my body had been jolted forward really hard and then back. I was driving a Mitsubishi pickup which has a stamped bed, so the flexion of the bed intensified the impact. So I wasn't feeling good, and I had this thing with my hand, this mess up, and go to the doctor, and they don't seem to think there's much else wrong. I had this orthopedist who I knew as a kid, and really great guy, really great doctor, but really cocky, and I know everything kind of guy. And over the next 2 weeks, I complained to him, saying, there's more wrong than just my hand. I think maybe I have something. Maybe my spine was injured. No, you're fine. Blah 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 blah. So, he won't order the MRIs. Well, I go to my primary care doctor and she orders the full set. And sure enough, the full set comes back and we see that in my cervical spine, I have a herniated disc at C5-6, I have bulging discs at C6-7 and every disc above C5-6. I also have a bulging disc down at L5-S1. So, I went back to the orthopedist and he's like, who ordered these MRIs? I said, well, you wouldn't do it. I said, so he goes, oh, well, it looks like you do have a problem. And so he sent me to a neurosurgeon. Neurosurgeon looked me over. He said, well, we have two options. We can go in the front, which is the best way to go, and take a piece of bone from your hip and put it in there. And it was during the AIDS crisis, so you had to give your own blood too. You didn't want to take bone from the bone bank, what they call the bone bank, if you didn't have to because of the risk of getting AIDS. And so they went ahead, and I decided to have just one level fused, because if I had them all fused, then I'd have this one big long bone, and I could break my neck a lot easier. So I had the one bone fused. The pain from the hip, when they took that piece of bone out of my hip, was worse than the pain in my neck. My neck got better over time, although I had issues for a long time after that, which we'll get into. but I'm on morphine. I'm liking it. I'm feeling better. When I get out of the hospital, I'm asking for more pain meds. Doctor was pretty good about it. He kept me on a low, on Darvocet, which is not, it's like below the Vicodin, below codeine, and that seemed to help me get by for a while. Well, for the next few months, I'm realizing I'm still not feeling very good. About 6 months later, I wake up one day and I go to walk and I kind of stumble, and I go, why did I stumble? I didn't step on anything. So I started to walk, and then I realized that my right foot wouldn't move upwards. It was paralyzed. I had what they called foot drop. So call the orthopedist again. He goes, we got to get you in right now for emergency surgery. He goes, I'm going to warn you. He goes, this one's going to be a lot worse. He goes, backs are way worse, because it's weight bearing. So they go in, and rather than fuse it, they want to do the least invasive thing. They do a laminectomy. They cut half the disc out, and that's it, and they send me home. Well, now I'm in a lot of pain. Still taking pain meds. I'm, at this point, addicted, but I'm not taking anything super heavy. Well, that began to change later, because now we're 9 months into this problem, and I go back to the doctor and say, look, I'm not feeling any better. This is horrible. The pain in my legs and my low back, and they go, okay. They did another MRI, and the disc had been demolished. It was completely smashed. So they had to go in, and this was a very serious operation at the time. They were using what are called Steffi plates, which are, a guy named Dr. Steffi invented these steel plates that are like washers that are horizontal, rectangular. And they take 2 washers like that, and they take 4 pedicle screws, which are about the thickness of your pinky, and they bolt you together with bone in between. And they use bone bank bone this time. Well, between that time when I was preparing for it, because it took a couple months, we had to get a body cast built. We had to, I had to give blood 3 times because I was going to need a transfusion. It was a long operation. I was getting very depressed. It's now been almost a year and a half, and I'm just stuck at home, not able to do much anything. And I started using some other drugs just because I had nothing else to do and I was depressed, and I was looking for a way to escape. So cocaine was popular back then, so I did a bunch of coke. Not like as much as a lot of people I knew did, but for me it was a lot. And I started not taking care of myself, to the point where when I went into surgery, I came out with pneumonia. And I had like scabs on my arms from like sores that weren't healing. And I remember my doctor, who I was friends with, Moses Tagioff, he comes in to see me after I get out of surgery. He goes, oh, Scotty, he goes, what did you do to yourself? I'll never forget that, because he knew that I hadn't taken care of myself. He didn't ask what or why. But I had pneumonia bad, and that experience in the hospital was just horrendous. For several days, they kept trying to get my fever to break without any luck. Got as high as 103, 104, 105. I had one lung completely filled up, and I had to keep turning. And, I've got a broken back throughout this whole time with these plates in there, just in severe pain, on tons of drugs. Well, finally the fever breaks, so they think, and they send me home. That night, the pain got so bad, I took every painkiller that I had, and I laid in bed, unable to move because I was just hurting so bad. My phone was next to me in bed, but I couldn't get to it because I was just so weak. And the pneumonia came back. And I was furious, I was sad, I was horrified, and I just looked up at the ceiling and I said, God, either take me or leave me the fuck alone. Were my exact words. And I passed out. Next morning I woke up, it was like I was reborn. The fever had broken. I was up and around. I felt 100% better. I was still on the pain meds. Pain's not really getting much better. I've got these plates in my body. They actually have to come out. That's another surgery down the road. Because of the litigation, my doctor, I had no medical insurance, so my doctor was nice enough to take my case pro bono, even though it was thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that became a pressure situation because it forced me to settle early so I could pay my doctor, because they weren't going to do another operation on me and take the plates out until I got my settlement. So I got screwed on my settlement somewhat because of that. And then they went and they took the plates out. Feeling better. I actually met my wife, future wife, during that time. Seeing some better things happen in life, but I'm still on the pain meds. And I'm not planning on going off them. I've never had this kind of pain, and it's constant, and it's nagging, and this is when the pain clinics came about. And my orthopedist says, well, he goes, you can go to one of these pain clinics. He goes, I can't keep prescribing you Vicodin EX, it's just not what we do, or, that's for another type of doctor. And so he sends me to a pain management clinic. Well, they gave me whatever I wanted. And at first I tried really hard to stay on low doses of stuff, but eventually it just kept going up and up and up and up. And at one point I overdosed. She put me on methadone, and I narked out, and I almost died. I woke up in the ambulance as I stopped breathing. I had overdosed on methadone. These doctors were careless, and I was irresponsible. But I was also, I was addicted, and you do things when you're addicted that you wouldn't do otherwise. And, make this point right now, nobody chooses to be an addict. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, oh, I'm going to be an addict. But the shame and the guilt, especially with my dad being a cop, and, I hid it for many, many years. But I also I told myself, I'm going to take whatever drugs I need to take to feel better. Nobody knows what kind of pain I'm in, and they don't have the right to regulate that with me. And so I stayed on high doses of Vicodin, and then I wound up with another doctor who actually wound up taking fentanyl on a regular basis. And at that time, I'm taking something that's 10 times the strength of morphine, and I'm really addicted. I've got a patch that gives it to me, and I also have these lollipops that get you really loaded, and they're really for cancer patients, but the pain clinics were doling them out because they could, and they could make money. And I was getting epidurals, and trying every Western medical thing, with very little luck. But the bottom line was I was a full-blown addict at this time, and it really affected my life negatively, especially my self-esteem. In retrospect, though, and even yesterday when I saw my doctor, one of them said, well, those medications actually saved you because that was your way of dealing and coping. The only thing is there's a price you pay. So I paid that price for a long time. And I got to a point finally where I got off all of them. And I was doing pretty well, except I was taking Suboxone. I was on Suboxone for a month. And then the day that I was going to refill it, I took my wife and son to a party. I played guitar for the first time with a band in a while. It was a great mood. Come back home. They're on their way to New York to go spend 2 weeks in New York with my wife's mom and family. Drop them off at the airport. I go over the freeway. I get in the left-hand turn. There's 2 left-hand turn lanes. I'm in the outside lane. I'm crossing Montague Expressway, which, as you know, is a big, wide expressway. Mm-hmm. It's straight where I'm at, but if you look past the light, there's a curve, and so if somebody's speeding around that curve, they don't see and that's what happened. A guy came speeding through that curve, and he ran the red light at 75 miles an hour, T-boned me, knocked me into a limousine, which got knocked all the way across the street, 2 lanes into the curb. I was completely just blown out. People come running to the car, don't move, you need to go to the doctor. Well, I would not go to the doctor. At this point in time, I'd had it with doctors. They'd almost killed me a couple times, and with my help, but still, they were irresponsible. refused to go to the doctor. I knew I was hurt bad. And I also thought at that time that God was punishing me. It's just like, why did this happen to me? Why, you know? And it really affected me bad. And again, my self-esteem dropped to zero. So now my wife and son are gone. I refused to go to the hospital. I went home, got into bed, went to sleep, woke up the next morning and I couldn't get up out of bed. Took me half an hour to work my way up out of bed, and I called my buddy Bill, who used to own this place. I said, Bill, I'm in bad shape. Can you take me to the hospital? Took me to the hospital. They gave me a jar of Dilaudid, and they sent me home. And you hurt your back, but they didn't do any MRIs or anything. And for that month, I don't remember anything. I was just narked out and on the drugs, and I was so depressed and so much pain. My family was gone. People from my wife's church were bringing me food. And here I was back on meds. Well, that was a bad time. I was going back and forth on the meds. And then finally, I got an MRI of my back. We lost our medical insurance that year. Right after I got hit, my wife lost her job, and then she missed the COBRA payment, so we had no insurance. So for a year, I laid around the house and in pain, just taking my drugs and not answering the phone, not going to the door, whatever, and just reclusing and falling worse and worse into the hole until finally we got insurance. I was able to get treated at Kaiser Pain Management Group. They got me off all the meds. But before that, I had to deal with this other back problem. So I had an MRI done, and sure enough, I had broken L4 right above the fusion at L5. So they went in and they fixed that. The doctor said he'd never seen anybody on much drugs, when I came in there. And when I got home, depression was worse, and that's when the other stuff happened, where my wife lost her insurance, and then we went a year later, after laying around, like I said, I finally got into this Kaiser Pain Management Group. I was on oxycodone at the time, taking like 5 times a day, 30 milligrams. That's a lot. And in order to qualify for the program, you had to get off the drugs. I went cold turkey, started going to NA, but I got off the drugs. And started learning about addiction and what addiction means. And, went through the whole shame, guilt thing, and it was horrible. And, I'm an advocate of the 12-step program, but it doesn't work for everybody. And it didn't work for me because when addiction is not just a disease. They say it's a disease. Okay, well, to a certain extent it's a disease, but it's much more than that. And if you read Dr. Gabor Mate and some of the new findings, they've discovered that addiction, as well as things like ADD and a lot of other sicknesses, are manifested from trauma, early childhood trauma and trauma from beyond. And that it's something that you reach for to try to, the first thing you do is you go into survival mode and you shut down, like I did. And then when that doesn't work, you have to start reaching for other things, which I just kept doing, reaching for other ways. But the thing that was hurting me the most was the self-esteem issue, being addicted and being an addict and the stigma of that. And I eventually learned that it wasn't my fault, and that it actually saved me. Mm-hmm. So that was why when the third accident happened, when we've talked about where I got hit by the speeding suicidal driver, as much as I was afraid of going back in, that was one of my biggest fears was, oh God, you're going to be addicted again,